friends, welcome back to the channel. I hope you guys are all doing really well. So I wanted to quickly wrap up 2025 and how I was doing with both my personal life and my reading and all of those kinds of things and goals going into 2026. Now I do this video every year. I talk about, what I enjoyed about the current year, what I could improve on, and then I have a whole list of goals for the following year, and it almost seems very daunting. It puts a lot of, you don't even realize it when you're doing it, but it puts a whole lot of pressure on you. So I'm going to wrap up 2025. I'm going to discuss 2026, but the whole theme of 2026 is going to be community and comfort, because I'm needing that next year. I didn't have the best year in 2025, so as a lot of us did. So we're going to talk a little bit about the books that I enjoyed in 2025 and what I have upcoming to stay on this trajectory of getting out of a 1.5 year long reading slump. So first of all, let's talk about some of the books. So this is probably my worst reading year that I've had in well over a decade. So, I mean, I don't want to say I only read, 40 books or whatever it is. I mean, I'm still reading for 2025. I'm still wrapping up books. But we're going to come out at about 42. I did have my goal. Originally, I had my goal set really high, and I brought it down to 50. So, I read 42 out of 50 books. So I can't say that that's bad, but just as far as my own reading goes, the first thing was, this is way less than what I usually read. I usually read anywhere between 75 and 90 books a year. But again, I mean, those are just goals. It's just numbers. As long as you're enjoying what you're reading, that's all that matters. It's not supposed to be a chore. But for me, I found that this was a year kind of transition. So I picked up and put down a lot of books. I wouldn't count them as DNFs because I would only get a short way into them and then I would put them down. Not because I wasn't enjoying them, but it just wasn't for me at the time. And I think that had a lot to do with the types of books that I was picking up. And, I'm starting to come into a new season of life now, and things are sort of changing a little bit. So it wasn't until I was well into July, and then throughout July, August, September was when I was sort of developing, a list of books that were really starting to tickle my brain a little bit. And then it wasn't until I was solidly into September that I was like, okay, the supernatural and gothic horror is what's appealing to me right now. I wasn't really feeling a lot of my YA books that I was reading. I know for Old School April, for Vamptember, a couple of the other readathons I was involved in, like I just wasn't feeling it at the time. And I mean, it happens to all of us. We can't force this. This is a hobby. This is not my job. It's not my career. So, we all have to gear towards what's interesting to us at the time. And I think that had to do with two reasons. September was a really big month for me, so I'll get into that a little bit. But yeah, it was a really rough year just with the types of books that I was trying to pick up versus what was really interesting to me at the time. So a couple of things I think had to do with kind of that continuing reading slump. The first was, like I said, it was the type of books I was trying to pick up, and I kind of had to refine my footing a little bit. And there's nothing wrong with that. And of course, I still love YA books and horror and middle grade and not specifically gothic books, but spooky books. And I love reading slashers and all of that kind of stuff. But it just wasn't appealing to my brain at the time. So that's one reason. The second reason, and this was a big theme for 2025 that I'm going to try to improve on again next year, is the nature of my adult job and the fact that I'm a complete workaholic. So I will basically give up my health, my sleep, my life, my hobbies, everything to make sure that jobs are done. And I have to be a little bit better at finding that balance. And I know I've spoken about this before. And I did make a change in 2025 from the previous year that I'm not working as much at night. I've been going into the office several hours earlier in the morning, so Matthew and I can still have our nights. But what I was finding is I was so drained by the time I got home that reading, especially because I wasn't reading a lot of the books that I wanted to at the time, I wasn't gravitating towards reading as an outlet for relaxation. So that was another thing, and we're going to talk about some things that I'm changing in 2026 as well. And then the third thing, of course, a lot of you know I was struggling with my health this year. So in July 18th, I believe, I did have a hysterectomy. So, and it was one of those situations that things have been getting worse and worse and worse and worse over like several years. And it wasn't until I had a fibroid that was the size of a melon protruding out of my stomach that they decided to do anything about it. I was having a lot of bleeding. I had endometriosis pretty badly as well. And then I had another situation that was on top of that kind of made them rush my surgery. So not getting into too much detail, but I had a lot of symptoms from all that. So I had symptoms from the situation with my uterus, like between my uterus and the fibroids, everything was enlarged and out of place. And then they put me on this medication that put me into menopause, and the side effects from that medication were horrible as well. I had a lot of dizziness. I had a lot of dizziness from what was going on in my stomach. My hair was falling out. It's only just, I mean, I'm sure you guys probably saw how thin my hair was getting in some of my videos, and a lot of it is still very, very dead, but it is starting to grow back now. So finally, after 20 years of waiting and agony, they finally got me in for my hysterectomy on July the 18th. And they, between my uterus and all the fibroids, especially the big one, like I said, that was the size of a mini watermelon, they removed over 4 pounds of material. So that was like over the top, like crazy that I had been made to wait that long. So I mean, that takes a toll on your mental health too. I was not in a very good place mentally, and then of course the medication that I was on that was putting me into menopause was making everything worse. So not a great situation in 2025, and I think that had a lot to do with my reading, and you know, I went through long periods not posting on the channel, and I just was not well. So September, like I had my surgery in July, and then so by September, that was when I was starting to really start to feel better. I wasn't completely healed, but I did get my 8-week medical clearance. And then I started doing a lot of walking outside and trying to get up and move around more. I literally looked like I was 7 months pregnant at one point. So that affected everything. It affected my ability to move around and exercise and do housework. Like even lifting a basket of laundry was like a no-go for me. And then there was a lot of dizziness and everything associated with it as well. So in September, that's kind of when everything sort of broke through. I broke through with what I was finding joy in my reading. I'm not sure if it was because I finally locked into the type of books that I wanted to read, or if it was just because, you know, I was starting to come out of all of those symptoms, that's kind of what I locked in on. So either way, I started to find joy in my reading again. I would either go out early in the morning or you know, come more in towards the fall. I was going out after work, getting lots of fresh air and reading. My hair was starting to grow back. My stomach had come way down. And then with a little bit of exercise and everything, you know, I was starting to control my weight and all of that sort of thing. So I started feeling a lot better. So I'm very, very happy to put 2025 behind me for a lot of reasons. You know, it's hard to find balance when you have the type of job that I work as a project manager with my type of personality, because I am a workaholic and I know I need to control that. And then, of course, I had all of those health problems on top of it. And then unfortunately, about 10 days after my surgery, I ended up back in the hospital with some post-op infections. I got up one morning, I really was not feeling well. You know, I had finished all my medications and everything from my surgery, and I was sweating, I was hot, and I had a fever, and went up to our urgent care here in our community, and all of a sudden there was an ambulance and all kinds kinds of tests being done and everything. And I ended up back in the hospital for 5 days with some post-op infections, so they kept me on antibiotics and all of that kind of stuff. And the side effects from the antibiotics weren't great either. Like, you want to talk about, like, they made me really stupid. Like, I know I shouldn't use that word, but like the confusion, and I found it really hard to formulate like a sentence and all of that kind of stuff, just because of everything they had me on. And then I wasn't due to be off work during that period, so I was trying to work on my phone in my hospital bed, and it was a whole thing. So like I said, between July and then into the first week of August was really bad. So by the time I kind of got over all that and got into September, that's when I really started to feel like myself again. So super, super happy that I have all of that behind me. I'll never have to deal with it again. It's finally done and out and over. And I was very, very thankful that they were able to do the surgery through laparoscope. So they didn't have to slice me open. They just made a couple of little slits and got everything out. And my surgeon was fantastic. And, you know, he made sure that I didn't have any kind of misgivings or anxiety or anything. Like, my trust was completely into him. And I'm fortunate that I ended up with some post-op infections after the fact, but that's, you know, that's a side effect of surgery. It can happen, and they didn't mess around with it. They got me right in right away and hooked me up to all kinds of stuff. So very, very happy to have that behind me. And then I guess what I wanted to do as well before I start talking about 2026 is just, even with the books that I had read, I wanted to discuss the ones that really stuck out in my brain as really, really great books. There was actually 2 that I wanted to talk about. They're not on my best books of the year list, but they're ones that stick out for specific reasons. So first of all, The Ghost Witch is one that I read, I believe, for halfway to Halloween. I can't remember. And this one really sticks out in my head because it was the biggest surprise of the year. This one has a lot of Halloween feels in it. It has, you know, the warm, fuzzy central story that ends up being super cute by the end. And it's really short as well. So this one I was reading kind of just as I was starting to come out of that that reading slump. So I guess it would have been towards spooky season more so than halfway to Halloween. So the Ghost Witch is definitely one that I wanted to mention. The other one that I wanted to mention is The Dead Game, which is a point horror book that I read as part of Shelley's Point Horror Book Club, and I was on her Instagram Live and discussing this book with her, myself, Katrina Brown, and Kelsey from Slime and Slashers, and it was just the best time. And I think a lot of things that happened during the year like that, like, you know, going on people's live shows and stuff, that's really what sticks out in my mind, because, you know, with having such a bad year, it was those things that I really, really needed, because I was in a really bad place mentally and physically. So that really sticks out in my mind as a really, really great day that just kind of got my mind off everything. And the other thing that stuck out to me this year was reading the Last Apprentice series with my husband. So Matthew is not a reader. He always jokes all the time that he read a book once. It was called James and the Giant Peach, that he had to read in school. So the fact that he took time to sit down and listen to audiobooks with me of one of my favorite series, and he's really, really enjoying it. You know, he got a lot out of it. He's gotten a lot of the folklore, and when we watch documentaries, he makes like tie-ins and stuff. So that was really special to me, because we would just lie in bed, and we have like a mattress heater, and because I had so much pain in my stomach and in my pelvic area, and I was so nauseous all the time, just lying on the heated mattress pad and just listening to something that was cozy and spooky and something that we both really, really enjoyed meant a lot to me. So we're through the first 4 books now, I believe. We took a little bit of a break. We're going to go back to it now, but he's really, really enjoying these, and I'm hoping he enjoys the rest of the series as well. So getting into the actual books that stuck out to me that I would call my favorites of 2025. So the first one is Incidents Around the House by Josh Malerman. And I read this one in very, very early 2025. I think I might have even started it the year before. I finished it in January or February. And this one is one that I hear on a lot of other people's lists as well. I know Amy McCaw really enjoyed this book. And there's one scene in this book that when she talks about it on her channel, she's like, there's one scene that I can't stop thinking about. I'm like, is it the whatever scene? She's like, yeah. And I'm like, yeah, I know. And this is one of those books that after I read it, I couldn't stop thinking about it. And still to this day, I can't stop thinking about it. It's a fantastic book. And it's told from the point of view of a child. So, which I think is a really cool aspect. And a lot of people don't like books that do that. But I really enjoyed this one. And I found that even though there was family drama wrapped into the story, it added to the story. It wasn't one that I couldn't wait to get away from the family drama. I found that it was done really, really well. And then the aspect of it being told from a child is very, very well done. And it's just a creepy, creepy book. So definitely Incidents Around the House had to go on this list. The next one is The Poison Thread by Laura Purcell. And so this one was one of, I believe, the earlier reads that we did for the book club. And probably the book that set Laura Purcell like way up on my list of authors that would be an auto buy for me. I've enjoyed just about everything she's written so far, and this one was just fantastic. There's another one by her called The Shape of Darkness, which I had read the year before. Now this one I didn't enjoy as much as The Shape of Darkness, but it still has all of that foreboding, unsettling feeling, and I really enjoyed the premise of this book. It was really harrowing, and it's one of those books that when you finish it, you're like, geez, I'm glad that's over because it's so depressing, but it's so, so good. Full 5 stars. Loved this one. Next up is Against the Darkness by Kendara Blake, which I finally picked up this year. I believe it had been sitting on my shelf for over a year before I read it. So this is the third and final book in the Every Generation series by this author that revolves around the Buffyverse. So I've often said that these 3 books are like seasons 8, 9, and 10 of the original show. It takes place kind of after the apocalypse and everything happens in Sunnydale, and everything explodes and the Hellmouth gets closed up again. They basically rebuild Sunnydale. And this revolves around Willow's daughter, and the whole thing around how and why Willow has a daughter is very, very cool. I thought it was really, really well done. And so you have legacy characters here. I will mention that Willow is in this. I'm not going to talk about anybody else. But there's so much going on here from, you know, the original cast, and then we have new adventures, we have new villains, we have a new group of Scoobies. So like I said, this centers around Willow's daughters, who gets called as a slayer, but she also, of course, being Willow's daughter, she's also a witch. So she's the first slayer witch, and it's just fantastic. And I've read quite a few like Buffy spin-offs, and this one is it. It was full 5 stars right through the whole series, and I enjoyed it more than I can tell you. So I would love to see this adapted into an actual show and be seasons 8, 9, and 10. Another fun one that I read this year is In Nightfall, which is a Lost Boys retelling. And I'm often a little bit weary about retellings and stuff like reimaginings, that sort of thing. But this was far enough away from the Lost Boys story that it was its own thing. It was its own entity, but it still had all of the wonderful nostalgia and the 80s, 90s feels that I was going for. I don't even know if it took place in the 80s and 90s. I believe they had cell phones at one point. So either way, this had all of the elements that I was looking for in a really, really good YA book. And, you know, I often find with YA that a lot of the characters can be super whiny, and, you know, the stories are a little bit too close to the source material, but this one was absolutely perfect. So if you're looking for a light popcorn read that has all of the vampire feels, I would definitely recommend this one. And the next I have a book that I have talked about so much, this year and in my wrap-ups for 2025 is At the Bottom of the Garden by Camilla Bruce. And you guys know that I absolutely devoured this book. I loved it so much. So I loved Camilla Bruce's aspects of winding in feminism and folklore and witchy vibes, and but what I really enjoyed about this book was the dark humor that revolved around the aunt. So the aunt is a murderess, and that, you know, is right on the back of the book. And she has, it's very series of unfortunate events because she takes in her two nieces because their parents die, but it's because she wants their fortune, and because she is running out of money. So she wants their fortune, but little does she know that she can see, or sorry, one of her nieces can see the ghost of her husband who is buried in the rose garden out back. And so it starts off this whole thing, and it's fantastic. I loved it cover to cover, and like I said, just her ability to wind in dark humor, especially around the aunt who, like I said, killed her husband. It's just fantastic. If you're looking for that kind of thing, definitely pick up Camilla Bruce. I have looked up a couple of her other books as well, and there's one that I discussed in my last video also that I can't wait to read more from her. She's just a fantastic writer. Next up was another Gothic book that really stuck out to me. So we're into that Gothic period now between September and December, where I read a whole bunch of books that were just ticking off all the boxes. They were tickling my brain. I was enjoying them cover to cover. And that's The Whistling by Rebecca Netley. And if you read this book, I would highly recommend reading the audiobook. The Audible version specifically has the most wonderful Scottish narrator. And, you know, I usually do speed up my audiobooks just a little bit, not a huge amount, unless it's something that I'm not really enjoying but I need to get through. I left it pretty much on like one time speed because her wonderful way of storytelling and her wonderful accent just really added to the whole atmosphere of this story. So this takes place on the Scottish Isles, and this young woman comes from Edinburgh out to one of the outposts into, of course, a crumbling old mansion to be a governess to a little girl who is mute because she's experienced a trauma, and she starts getting wound into this mystery that she has to try to unwind, and it was fantastic. Now, the only thing about this book was by the time I was getting to 2/3 to 3/4 of the way through, I was like, I just want to get to the end. But it was fantastic. It has all of the wonderful atmosphere, and the mystery and the haunting and everything is just fantastic. I would highly recommend this one. And then, of course, next up on the list, so this list is not in any specific order. These are just books that I enjoyed this year. Like, I didn't do like a number 5 to number 1 or anything like that. It's not a countdown. So this is The Lighthouse Witches by C.J. Cook, of course. So I've talked about this one in my past couple of videos, that this book and this author were really standouts for me in 2025. So I thought C.J. Cook's writing style was fantastic. The story she told was over the top. We have, I believe, 3 timelines, and there's POVs of the mother who moves into this lighthouse that she has to paint a mural. There's point of views of both the daughters, and then there's a point of view of another character as well who's in a different timeline. And so this centers around a mother, like I said, a single mother who has to go into this lighthouse and to paint a mural, and one of her daughters goes missing. And 20 years later, and there's a whole bunch of like witchy folklore wrapped around with like really spooky townsfolk and stuff. And then 20 years later, the other daughter finds her sister, but she's the same age as she was 20 years before. And the story is so complex and it's so thrilling. And it was written, I've said this before, it was written like a really good show. Like, you couldn't wait to get to the next storyline. Like, often when I have dual or triple timelines, you know, I'll enjoy one more so than the others. And I can't wait to get back to that timeline. But this one, like, I couldn't wait to, like, once one finished up, I couldn't wait to get to the other one. But it was like it with every single one of the timelines and every single one of the POVs. So, and just her writing style is fantastic. So I've mentioned this a couple of times now. If you haven't read any CJ Cook, please pick up one of her books, and this one is spectacular. Totally a standout for 2025. And then the last books I wanted to talk about before we move on to 2026 goals is the Hidden Haunts series. So this year I've read Hidden Haunts Scotland and Hidden Haunts England, and before the end of the year, or probably going into the new year, I do want to read Hidden Haunts Ireland. So this series is by W.J. Gilbert, and he is the host of Airy Edinburgh here on YouTube, and I've talked about him extensively on the channel. We love his channel. He tells the best ghost stories, and he has the best voice. And what I really enjoy about these books specifically is because he doesn't just tell ghost stories, he tells the history of a building or an area or whatever and what he's talking about. He goes into a deep dive in that area, and then the ghost stories that are wound into the history. So you really get an appreciation for, you know, places or people or buildings that hold energy, and it's just replayed. And this is why there are so many ghost stories that are wrapped into the history of these areas in the UK. So I also mentioned before, I really enjoy these ones because eventually I would like to get to the UK, and these are areas that I would definitely want to visit and experience for myself. Okay, so there's my 2025 wrap up. Going into 2026, so number one priority on the list is trying to get out of being a workaholic a little bit more. Baby steps. 2025 was better than 2024, which like 2024 was just over the top. 2025 was a little bit better, but towards the end of the year I was still working 50 to 60 hour weeks, and so I have to be better about not getting too deep into the rabbit hole and making sure that I have time for myself and my hobbies, and that, you know, not feeling guilty about sitting down and taking a break because it is necessary. So, and I think one of the things that I'm trying to remind myself is, just after everything that had happened with my health in 2025, I really do need to make this a priority. For one, because, you know, I don't want anything like that to happen again, especially where I got all those post-op infections. But also, I'm not getting any younger. And, you know, my doctor often says to me, she's like, you are 43, you're not 23. So I really do have to make that a little bit more of a priority. And Matthew and I have started keeping up with our exercise since I had that 4.5 pounds removed out of my gut. So it's been a lot easier. So we're going to keep up with that. And then the second thing is, you know, so obviously making time for my channel, for my reading. Now that I'm feeling a lot better, I'm getting enjoyment out of my books again. But something happened a couple of weeks ago, actually, over on Bookstagram, and in one of the group chats that I'm involved in with some of the booktubers over there, somebody brought up, and I'm glad that they did, because I think all of us have been feeling this, but nobody was openly talking about it. It's just, we've all felt really disjointed in the past year. We've been disjointed from our reading, we've been disjointed from our channels, we've been disjointed from each other and building community. So something that we really want to prioritize is making sure that we have hangouts with each other, and, you know, it doesn't have to be all productivity all the time. Like, we want to hang out and do crafts and talk lightly about books, probably, but not put too much pressure on ourselves, which as booktubers I find that sometimes we do. But we want to build that sense of community again. So that's going to be a really big priority this year, is making sure that I'm making time for my friends, because a lot of us booktubers are very close, and other people in the horror community, podcasters and book talkers and all of that kind of stuff. We want to make sure that we're making time for each other, and not only just our books and our channels. So we've said that, you know, we want to have more hangouts and that kind of thing. And then I do want to start doing live shows again on the channel. But I think instead of putting so much pressure on myself that it has to be on a Sunday morning, I'll probably schedule one like every 2 weeks, and it's going to be like a comfort thing. So it's going to be coloring or de-stickering books, or building Lego or crafting or whatever like that. And it doesn't always have to be sprints. It could just be a hangout where I'm not reading at all. So we really want to rebuild that sense of community. So this is why at the beginning of the video I mentioned about comfort and community. So we want to rebuild that again and stop putting so much pressure on ourselves. So that's going to be really good. And I do, like, as far as my reading goes, I'm not going to set my goals too high this year. Whatever I read, and whatever I'm into at any particular time, I'm going to read, instead of trying to like put myself into a hole again, because like I said, I'm just coming out of this reading slump now, and I don't want to get back in there again. And I want to concentrate on two things. So number one is ghosts and gothic. So, the kind of gothic books that I talked about in my 2026 anticipated reads. I want to read more off my ghosty shelf. I want to read more supernatural horror. But I also want to concentrate on picking up some of my vintage collection as well. So you guys know that I do very large book hauls pretty much every month to add to my vintage collection, and that will be continuing. No change there. I love my vintage books, but I do want to start picking up more of my vintage collection. So 2026, like I said, is going to be community and comfort and ghosts and gothic. That's what it's going to be for me this year, and I'm really happy that I got my health stuff taken care of. So the last kind of missing piece that I really have to work on, and is a huge goal for me, is trying to get out of this workaholic sort of habit that I'm in constantly. So nothing really changing for the channel. I did try to go back up to 2 videos a week for a while. It's just a bit too much. There's other things that I want to be working on, and I want to make time for my reading. So 1 video a week, it'll be on Sunday, and I have to get out of the habit of like recording, editing, and posting all in the same day. So I'm going to be going on a little bit of a new schedule for myself for recording. But the videos will still come out on Sundays. And like I said, probably once every 2 weeks I'll schedule either sprints or a hangout, and make sure that, I share the link to other booktubers to come on, and we can chat, and you guys can chat in the comments and everything. So really want to make sure that we're building that sense of community, because you know what? I don't care who you are, the world is a horrible place right now, and we're all a little bit saturated with it. So the other thing that I'm going to try to do is not watch as much political commentary as I have been. You want to keep up on current events and everything that's been going on, but it's really affecting my mental health. So I have to dial that back a little bit and make some time for things that are comforting and that are going to do me a little bit of good. So that's everything. That's 2025 wrapped up. 2025 best reads, I guess, and going into 2026, what we're going to be doing. Very, very light goals, nothing too big this year, but I hope you will come and hang out with me on the channel when you can get a chance. So I hope everyone is having a wonderful New Year's, and if you enjoyed the video, give me a thumbs up and leave me a question or comment down below, because I love chatting with you guys. But until next time, stay spooky, everybody. Bye.